Hey guys, welcome back to this week's Marvel Monday. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for missing an upload last week. I had finals last week and it was really hard for me to try to find time to film and edit and things like that, so I just couldn't do the upload at all. But we're back on schedule now. I'm home for the holidays, so I have a couple weeks off from school and work, so hopefully I'll be able to get a whole bunch of videos in for you guys. So this week we're going to cover Netflix. I keep wanting to call it Marvel Netflix, but it's Netflix Marvel. So Netflix Marvel Daredevil episode 4, In the Blood. Just a disclaimer, all thoughts are my own. Feel free to think differently. There's no right or wrong answer with these types of things. And I will give a brief summary of the episode before I go into the analysis, but it's recommended that you watch the video beforehand so that way everything makes a little more sense. Okay, let's get into the summary. After seeing a flashback with Anatoly and Vladimir Runskahov trapped inside a Siberian prison, we see Matt with Claire, getting patched up after a fight. Claire says she's been hiding out at her friend's apartment since the encounter her and Matt had with the Russian on the rooftop in episode 2. Matt insists that she needs to stay there until he can take down the Russians. Anatoly and Vladimir, in an attempt to find the masked man, visit Semyon, the Russian Matt and Claire met in episode 2, and ask him what he knows about the masked man. Semyon says the girl, Claire, is the key to finding the masked man. So the Russians find Claire and kidnap her. Fortunately, she was able to call Matt and tell him, so Matt throws his cane aside and rushes off to save her. Matt delivers a lot of hits to the Russians, but ultimately Claire is the one who got the last punch in. Oh, and Matt tells Claire his real name is Matt, not Mike. Throughout all of this, Karen Page is trying to convince Ben Urich, an investigative journalist, to publish a story on the Union Allied scandal. He refuses at first, but after he ends up at the Union Allied auction with Karen, telling her to try and spot anyone who's not bidding, he shows interest in the story. We also see Fisk see the art curator that sold him the Rabbit in a Snowstorm painting and asks her out to dinner. We learn that Fisk was born and raised in Hell's Kitchen. He says when he grew older, he realized that the city needed to change and he decided he was going to be the one to make that change. Anatoly ends up getting killed by Fisk after he interrupts Fisk's dinner with Vanessa. Okay, so let's get into the analysis and thoughts and everything. So just overall, I mentioned this in the last episode, there was a lot of gore and violence in this one. Like, Anatoly's death makes me queasy, and I don't necessarily have a weak stomach, but I don't really have a tough stomach either. Like, I can't stand excessive amounts of gore like this, but Anatoly's death in particular is just, I won't go into detail, but it's just very gross, and I feel sick, and it's just nasty. I mean, I just don't see... I get that the show is trying to be realistic and, grounded, but it just feels like that they could have made an exception for that and been like, okay, we're not going to make this so realistic. We're going to tone it down a little bit. But they decided to go with that. So I just don't like that part. There wasn't a whole lot of fighting in this episode, surprisingly. There was only 2 fight scenes throughout this whole thing. It was when Matt rescued Claire and then when Fisk killed Anatoly. I think those were the only fight scenes in this whole episode. The rest was just dialogue. Yeah. So that was also another interesting thing. They didn't rely heavily on the action. They relied heavily on the characters and the dialogue that they had. As they used a lot of stark contrasts in this episode with the plot, so they would constantly switch between all the subplots going on, like Karen trying to convince Ben to write the story, Fisk getting to know Vanessa and going out to dinner with her, and Matt rescuing Claire and, going back again. And then with the visual symbolism, one thing I noticed was they kept going along more with the stark contrast visually. So when we see Vanessa, she's in the museum. Obviously, a museum is going to be very plainly decorated and everything's going to be bright so you could see the art and everything that they're displaying properly. So everything is pretty much all white, and she is wearing all white, and then Fisk is wearing all black. So I feel like that's some pretty obvious symbolism of good and evil, right and wrong, that type of thing. And I just really like that because Fisk is a villain. He's the antagonist of the whole series. So to have him be the only dark spot in that entirely light setting with the white walls and the light floors and her dressed in all white in the bright white lights, it just created a very sharp contrast that you can see. It almost kind of reminded me of yin and yang, like there was good and the bad and the good, that type of thing. So I just liked that whole aspect of it. And then just another funny moment. I love Foggy. I'll say it in every episode that he shows up. I love Foggy. The one part where Claire calls Matt and letting him know that she got kidnapped. Matt pulls out this cheap little burner phone that he had, and Foggy's just like, "Oh, it's a girl. You got a new phone for your girls. Nice. My life sucks." And he's just like so let down about it. I'm like, oh, I just thought that was funny. Matt's like, whatever, man, go away. Another thing I thought that was really cool with the humanization with this episode was when the two Russians take Claire, when they're in the taxi cab or whatever, and then the one Russian is on the phone with, I don't remember who he was talking to, but he was on the phone with someone saying that, we got the girl. The camera decides to focus in on him when Claire starts to, like, kind of freak out a little bit and trying to get out of the trunk. He kind of turns around and the camera focuses on him, and you can see that he has, like, this look of regret and shame and guilt. He's just, like, you could tell that he's, like, starting to second guess everything. And then he kind of stops and he looks like he's gonna, like, try to figure out a way to get her out of there, but then he just, decides not to go with that idea and then faces forward, and then the scene switches to something else. I thought that was cool because then it shows you that the bad guys in this series aren't necessarily bad guys. Like, they're not being evil for the sake of being evil. So this guy obviously has some good in him and some sort of moral compass that he realizes that, oh, I probably shouldn't be doing this. Oh, I should probably do something to stop things like this from happening. So I thought that was really cool. And then it also kind of shows up later with the other guy that he was with. They're interrogating Claire, trying to figure out what she knows about the masked man, which she knows nothing at this point. She doesn't know that his name is Matt. She doesn't know that he's an attorney. She doesn't know anything about him. And then the one guy is gonna just, like, land this really bad blow on her. And then the other guy stops him and he's like, no, 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 stop. And then there's an ever so slight pause right there. And then he goes on to say, Fisk doesn't want her dead, until we find all the answers or something. But there's just that slight pause. Like, you could just tell he stopped and he wasn't thinking about, oh, because Fisk wants her alive until we figure out the answer. That wasn't the reason why he stopped him. There was another reason there. And then he came up with the Fisk justification as an afterthought. So I thought that was really cool because then you have two bad guys that aren't necessarily bad guys. Yes, they're doing bad things, and yes, they're hurting people, and yes, they're committing crimes. But they're not doing it just to be bad. They have some good in them, and I really, really liked that. So jumping all the way back to towards the beginning of the episode when Fisk is about to go see Vanessa when she's in the art gallery, Wesley's in the car with Fisk, and Fisk goes to get out of the car, and Wesley goes to follow him, and Fisk is like, no, 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 Wesley, stay in the car, I got this. And what you can see, Wesley is, like, visibly scared. He's just kind of like, what are you doing? Like, you need someone with you, and you can tell that he's, like, freaking out and thinking all these worst case scenarios of what can happen if Fisk goes in alone, if he gets attacked. Yes, Fisk is a good fighter, but then there's always that irrational fear of something bad happening, even with the odds are in your favor, something bad could happen. So you could tell that he's thinking about all these worst case scenarios, and Fisk just kind of stops and he just, like, puts his hand on, like, Wesley's leg or something. He's just like, I'll be okay. And Wesley's like, okay, fine. But you can tell he's, like, visibly nervous and, like, visibly scared and concerned genuinely for Fisk's safety and his life. And so I also think that was really cool. And that's one of the reasons why I like Wesley. He's not just, like, this maniacal, villain just to be a villain. He does bad things just to do bad things. It's like he genuinely cares for Fisk. Who knows? Maybe Wesley doesn't agree with anything of what Fisk is doing. Maybe he only agrees with some of it, but he just wants to support Fisk and he wants to protect him. Maybe he knows Fisk's backstory. No spoilers, because we haven't gotten to that part in the series yet, but if you know his backstory, maybe Wesley knows that, and that, adds some more concern for him, and he's just like, I have to look after this guy, I have to care for him, protect him. So I feel like that's really interesting, and that's one of the reasons why I like Wesley. He's not just your typical bad guy. Okay, so final thoughts. The episode is good. I liked it. Again, unnecessary violence. I just don't get... I don't get it. I really don't. It's just, Anatoly's death is just so nasty. No, I can do without that. I like Wesley. I like Foggy. They're my favorite characters ever. I like falling asleep. You know, they're my favorite characters ever. I love Wesley and I love Foggy. Matt was good. I liked the kind of, I mean, obviously it's cliche, the damsel in distress line, but they didn't make it so she was completely, like, yeah, she was in distress, but she wasn't like helpless. Like, you know, she ended up, you know, landing the final blow on that last bad guy and knocking him out, ultimately finishing the fight. And she dealt with whatever they did to her. It's still kind of like unclear on what they did, but they obviously did stuff to her. So the fact that she like stayed conscious for one thing, and I love Claire. And then we also got to see a teeny bit of Matt's soft side at the end where he's like, you know, he just goes up and hugs Claire. Because if you think about it, up until now, we haven't really seen Matt comfort anyone. So, also granted, he's not in a whole bunch of situations where like people are sobbing their eyes out. Most of the time, he deals with people and they're knocked out because he knocked them out. And so he showed a little bit of his soft side when he went and rescued the boy. Like, he remembered to take his mask off and, like, reveal his eyes and be like, hey, I'm here to help you. I'm here to take you home to your dad. And then, so that was a little bit of a soft side. But this one was obviously the most, I don't want to say vulnerable. I guess emotionally available is the right term. This is the most emotionally available we've seen Matt thus far. And I just really like that, just a sweet little hug, and he just stands there. He doesn't say, oh, it's okay, or, you know, it's just like they just stand there and they hug, and he just comforts her, and I just feel like that's really sweet. So yeah, that's it for this video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that bell notification. That way you get notified every time we post a video. Bye, guys! But ultimately, Claire is the one that delivers a lot of, and ask him where he knows, and ask him after seeing a flashback with Anatoly and Vladimir Ransahov,